Good morning, guys. Welcome back to my channel. So today is February the 4th. It's currently 4 o'clock in the morning, so 4:08. Today's video is going to be on childhood trauma. So this may be a long video. I'm not for sure. If you want to get a snack or something to drink, go ahead and do it. And most likely there will be tears in this video. So just preparing you for those things. We're just going to go over some scriptures and we're going to go into some details about my childhood trauma and just some encouragement at the end. So yeah, I'm going to pray and we're going to get into the video. Dear Lord, I thank you for this day, God. I thank you for allowing this person to watch this video, God. It came to them for a reason. I pray that you just continue to strengthen us all as we go through our healing processes. Each healing is going to be different than the other person's healing. So I pray that you just continue to allow us to be open-minded and allow us to know that you can do the impossible. I love you and I thank you in Jesus' holy name. Amen. So, what is childhood trauma? I suggest you get, I don't know if you can get if you want to get a pen and paper, you can, because this is more going to be like just talking freely. But if you want to jot down a couple notes, go ahead. So childhood trauma can occur when a child witnesses or experiences overwhelming negative events in childhood. Many childhood experiences can be overwhelming for a child. These can occur in relationships such as abuse, assault, neglect, violence, or bullying. Okay, so I have 3 verses that I'm going to read to you, and then I'm going to just explain a little bit. So Ephesians 6, verse 4. In the Amplified Version, it says, Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger. Do not exasperate them to the point of resentment with demands that are trivial, or unreasonable, or humiliating, or abusive, nor by showing favoritism or indifference to any of them, but bring them up tenderly with loving kindness in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Okay? So, when you're disciplining a child, you should first control yourself. What right do you have to say to your child that he needs discipline when you obviously need it yourself? So I think that's important. Just an important note is that when we are disciplining a child, we're disciplining our own child, we're disciplining any kid, we first have to control ourselves, because if we're out of control and we don't have any self-control, it's going to affect the child, and we're still working on self-control. So our children, the children that God has blessed us with, or the children that God has allowed us to be around, they still have to work on their self-control just as we are. So, we need to be patient with them and not provoke them into doing things. Provoke is to stimulate or give a rise to a reaction or emotion, typically a strong or unwanted one in someone. So you're provoking this child to do stuff that, should not be done. So it's important that we just, we give them positive experiences and positive reinforcement. So yeah, Colossians 3, verse 21 is our next verse, and it's from the New Living King translation. So it says, Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. So that means lest, I'm not for sure I'm saying that right, with the intention of preventing something undesirable to avoid the risk of. So, one, we don't want, fathers, don't provoke your children. And it's not just talking about one parent or just the fathers, but it's talking about both parents too. It says children have a responsibility to obey their parents, okay? But parents here putting one into the father have a responsibility not to provoke their children. Parents can provoke their children by being too harsh, being too demanding, too controlling, unforgiving, or just plain angry. This harshness can be expressed through words, through actions, and through a nonverbal communication. So basically, if you're being too harsh on them, if you're being too demanding, you demanding this, this, and this, and out of there, it's okay if a teenager, you're trying to have your 5-year-old do what a teenager does. That's not, and you're kind of trying to control their every move. You're being unforgiving because God has forgiven us, or we're being unforgiving to our children, or just being plain angry with them, So, in most parenting problems, the parent blames the child. It is easy to do because the problem is usually most evident in the bad behavior in the child. But Paul wisely reminds us that the bad behavior may actually be provoked by the parent. In this case, it doesn't justify the bad behavior of the child, but it may explain part of it. It is commanded of parents to do everything they can not to provoke their children. Okay? So, lest they become discouraged. So children who grow up with parents who provoke them will become discouraged. When they don't feel the love and support from their parents like they should, they will come to believe the whole world is against them. And because their parents because they don't feel their parents are for them, they feel like they're against them. This reminds us of how important it is to season our parenting with lots of grace. If God shows us grace, when we don't deserve grace, you know what I'm saying? We should show our children so much grace. God seasons our grace so much for us. He does. Perhaps we should be so gracious and gentle and forgiving and long-suffering with our children as God is with us. We need to do the same thing because God has given us these kids, even our own kids, has given us kids that we are around, because I work with kids, or nieces and nephews, you know what I'm saying? I know this is pertaining to parents, but it's okay for other people to, especially if you're around this kid a lot of the times. You want to season your parenting with grace because it takes a village to raise kids. You know what I'm saying? So you want to, whatever your correction is, you want to do with grace. Whatever it is, you want to be forgiving. You want to be gentle. You know that this is a kid. Remind yourself this is a child, and it's even with adults, you want to be gentle and forgiving. So just a reminder of that. Our last verse is Proverbs 22, verse 6. And I'm reading out the new King James Version. It says, train a child up in a way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So that's a classic verse that a lot of people use. So it speaks to the discerning of the child's strength and weaknesses, and parenting in a way that takes those into account. So no two kids are alike. So it says train the child up in a way that he should go, not in the way his sister should go, or not in a way that his brother should go, or he or she in that situation, but trying to train a child up in that way that person should go, because each kid's going to be different. No two kids are alike, What works on one kid is not going to work on the other one. But what works on one kid may not work on the other kid. So you have to be able to know your children's strengths, and you have to know their weaknesses. You have to know what's the best way to parent this particular child. You have to take time to get to know your child, and you have to take time to build up their weaknesses. Okay, they're weak in this area. Okay, let's help them out with that. They're weak in listening, because that's a lot of kids. Majority, I would say 9 out of 10 kids have a listening problem, and there's always that one kid that listens really good. So that's not their weakness. Maybe their weakness is cleaning up after themselves, certain things like that. So you have to continue to just prepare your kids, and know their strengths, know their weaknesses, and build them up. So, yeah. So, this part of the video is going to be me just explaining my healing process from my childhood trauma, giving you examples of it, and giving you a little bit of encouragement. So, healing from your past is hard work. It's very hard. It's not easy, and it takes lots of time. I wish somebody would tell me that healing from your past is hard work. I just thought, oh, I'm gonna pray for it, and it's gonna happen. But no, it's hard work. It's not easy, and it takes time. There was a lot of tears. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of frustration, and there's a lot of remembering things you don't want to remember. But I think it's really important to go back, ask God to remind you of those things, even if He is giving you flashbacks of remembering the things that you've gone through, so that you know that, hey, God has really healed me from this, and this is what happened. So, one, your childhood can affect your future, either in a good way or a bad way. So, it can either turn you away from those things that you've seen, or turn you towards those things that you've seen. So, let's say your childhood was a good childhood, and your dad and your mom was in your life. So you could either do one or two things. You could turn and do the same for your kids, or you can turn and do a different thing for your kids. So most likely, you're going to turn and do the thing and be there for your kids. But each person is different. My childhood was different. It was definitely something that, it was a lot of trauma. It was a lot of neglect. It was a lot of different things that, a child should not experience or see. So when I was doing this healing process, I felt all that pain and hurt. I had felt that pain and hurt throughout my life. So I was really trying to avoid that and not go back to that. But I had to go through that in order to heal properly, and I've honestly never had that person that was building me up. My sister Zaria was really a role model to me, and she was, there. But we were kids, we never had that one person that was constantly building us up, constantly, doing things for us, so that was a little hard for us. But literally, all of the things that you go through my childhood, me experiencing. So if you have a different experience, I'll leave it in the comments, and I would love to hear your experience of your childhood and things like that. But for my childhood, I feel like all of that stuff that happened to me is like my body was, or my mind forgot about it. Majority of that stuff, I say about maybe 85% of it, I blocked it out. 15% I'm remembering. So when I got to college and I was really isolated, it was just me. I wasn't with my family anymore. All of those memories and all that stuff that I went through started to come to the surface. And I was like, oh, whoa, So through isolation, you start to remember things, because literally it was just me in college. I didn't make any friends. I'm not good at making friends, even now. I don't know. I'm not good at social interactions. I need to get better at those, but, yeah. So, it was really hard for me because nobody was there when I was at my darkest moment. And, I was just suffering through so much at that time, my self-esteem, my, confidence in myself. There was so much I was going through, and nobody was there during those darkest moments but God, So, that moment when I wanted to kill myself, God was there for me. When I didn't feel loved, when I didn't feel worthy, when I didn't feel like getting out of bed or any of those things, God was the one pushing me. There was a lot of sleepless nights and constant anxiety attacks. And anxious, there's a lot pacing around the room. There was a lot of, just staying up all night and just, restlessness. It was a lot, and when I turned my life over to God, I was like, okay, I'm going to be healed now. But honestly, it was a process. It really was. And I'm very grateful for that process because God had taught me so many things through that. I could say to this day that I'm don't have anxiety attacks anymore. I'm growing better with people. My anxiety is definitely I get anxious sometimes, but I'm not where I was, which I'm very thankful for. Definitely not where I was. I'm able to talk in front of a group of people and not feel overwhelmed or anything like that. So God definitely has done the work on me. So I'm going to give you a few examples of my past and how it led to later issues in my life. So when I was a small child, I was constantly compared to my sister. If you know me, I'm a little ditzy. I'm a little over the place. I'm not, I'm unique in myself, okay? So, and this has just been me, me, my personality, who I am. And I think when you have a person who is unique and is not like the other groups or not like the other people in the group or the other siblings, it's hard to be able to evaluate them or say things to them, or embrace their uniqueness, especially I think in the culture that I was raised in. I did not have common sense back then. I was just free will, I just did whatever. And, my sister, though, she's very smart, and she's still very smart, but during that time, she's very smart. She was everything that you want a kid to be, and I was the total opposite. I was smart in myself. I had good grades, but I didn't blend in with the crowd. I didn't like to be around other people, you know what I'm saying? I was a good listener and everything like that, but I was just, all in my head majority of the time. So she was constantly, she was constantly doing, that A+ student, mature, things like that. And I was just in that kid phase. And so we constantly got compared. And I remember, on so many accounts that, I didn't understand something. And, if I didn't understand it the first time, oh, well, why are you not like Zaria? Why can't you be like Zaria, I remember hearing that said so many times to me as a child, you need to be more like Zaria. Zaria's smart. You need to be more like Zaria. She knows what I'm talking about. Or you need to be more like someone else because they know. Instead of truly accepting your child or helping them understand or learn, there was a lot of comparison. That comparison led into later issues in life, constantly comparing myself to other people, constantly thinking what other people thought about me. That is a big barrier. If you don't encourage your children to be uniquely themselves and you compare them to another child, that can affect their future. So I definitely did mine, and to this day I'm a little I get a little God has taught me I can't control what anyone else says about me, but I can control my actions and I can control what I think about myself. So, sometimes I have a bad day when I'm over here just comparing, and some days I'm like, okay, God, this is what God's telling me. I need to listen. But I really have rarely had those times where I'm comparing myself to someone else because I'm really in tune with who I am. I have that confidence now. I have that self-esteem. But I have that confidence. I have that self-esteem, a high self-esteem rather than low. So I'm constantly building myself up rather than tearing myself down. So God has definitely helped me out with comparison. Number 2, another example is never having a stable living situation. So as a child, we moved from home to home. So, we stayed with our grandmother majority of the time. We lived with our mom, but then our grandmother was our babysitter. So sometimes, if we didn't have a place to stay or my mom had to work a lot or stuff like that, we would mainly stay with her. So after she died in 2009, everything started to crumble after that. My mom started to do drugs heavily. She lost her job. We lost our apartment. So we lived from house to house for a very long time, for a couple years. And then we got a new house. And then, my mom was still doing drugs and things like that. And we had to get kicked. We got kicked out of that house. We had to move to Detroit. Then we came back for after that year. And ever since that year, we moved from house to house, house to house. Like, it wasn't a stable living situation for a child. There was not consistency. So, and that causes you to have that, like, no, if you don't have consistency, then you're most likely to be inconsistent. So yeah, God's working with me this year on consistency. But not having a living situation, and after that, I never lived with my mom again after we came back from Detroit. Like, I lived with her maybe like for a couple months, but then we didn't live together after that. Like, it was on and off. It was a situation in which your parents had abandoned you, because my dad was never in my life, really. I mean, he wasn't, like, when I was a child, like little baby and things like that. But he never lived with me or anything. He had his own situation. So he had his own situation with his wife and his kids. So you were abandoned by your mom, forced to live with your cousins, forced to live with your aunt, because you don't have anywhere else to go, So you're abandoned by your mom and you're abandoned by your dad. And abandonment is hard for a child. That's neglect. You're neglecting your child that you gave birth to. When you choose drugs over your kids, it's hard, and that's one reason I never did drugs. It's one reason I never smoked. That's one reason why I never done any of that. One, because I didn't want to go down that same road as I seen the other people. That was never a desire for me. That was never something I wanted to do. I said, I'm not doing that. I don't want that. I don't want to be in a place where I can't remember where I am, or where my kids are, what am I doing, and things like that, or when I have kids and things like that. But I never wanted to be in a place like that. So, it's hard to be abandoned by people, and I'm still healing from that abandonment to this day, and I think it's, when you think about it and you think about everything that you went through, you're like, man, my mom and my dad really did abandon me, because there would be months on months on months that we didn't even have contact with our parents, and then all of a sudden we're supposed to just be like, oh, how are you doing? It's hard, it hurts. Then you're forced to live with a person or people who have different lifestyles or different values and roles for each person's house. So now you have to remember each of those things. So it was a little hard. Now, am I grateful? I am so grateful that those people let me stay in their house. They let me live with them. They took us in and things like that. I'm so grateful, because if not, we wouldn't have any place to go. So that was definitely God. He was definitely allowing us to have a place to stay. So I'm completely grateful. It was just hard to have that consistency, because it was here a couple months, here over here a couple months, until we got to 10th grade. We stayed with our aunt for the remainder of high school. So yeah, then that was a little bit more consistency. Another experience that led to our trauma, that led to issues later on in life, is being bullied as a child. As I said, I was a different child. I was very unique, It wasn't like all the other kids and, things like that. I was by myself. I would rather be by myself. So, being bullied as a child, I think that affects you differently, because if you let it affect you, of course. But, being, told you're ugly and things like that, it's not nice, It's not something you want to hear. So then you're thinking in your head, oh, I'm just, never going to be good enough. I'm never going to do these things. So, yeah, being bullied is really sad for a child, because, each kid is different. So that's something to remember. but emotional abuse. Now, there was some physical abuse, and I was talking to my sister about this yesterday, and physical abuse, people think, oh, now people are like, oh, I whip my kids all the time, and I feel like, okay, my view on whooping kids is something that I don't personally want to do. That's just not my way of discipline. If that's someone else's way of discipline, that's perfectly fine. But physical discipline leads to, a barrier being crossed. You know what I'm saying? So we will whoop when we were kids, and we would go to school with whelps on us, with bruises and things like that, because it went over the boundary. It went over what it was supposed to be. Now, you whoop your kid, things like that, but you have to have self-control. And if you don't have any self-control, you're over here hitting your kid for 20 minutes, and now they got bruises, and they're going to school. There was multiple times that CPS was called on us. Because of the bruises and things like that, and the neglect and situations and things like that. There was so much, so physical abuse, if you choose to do that, make sure you have self-control. I won't say physical abuse, but if you choose to whoop your kid, if you choose to whoop your kid, you have to have self-control in what you do. You can't just be like, oh, let me go do this, and now they got bruises on them, they got whelps. And also, what I've learned in psychology class is that physical abuse, as people saying, I keep saying physical abuse, I didn't mean to say that, but whooping your kids or, putting your hands on them and things like that, that can lead to later on traumatic experiences. It's like, oh, okay, well, my mom whooped my kid, whooped me, I'm gonna whoop my kids. But were you really okay when she was putting her hands on you? Did you like when she was physically hitting you? You know what I'm saying? Or hitting you with belts. Did you like that? Was that something you liked? Did you learn from that? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. I don't, like, me personally, that was not something I liked. I mean, I know that discipline is something you're not going to like, but there are ways to discipline a child without putting your hands on them, without physically touching them. There's a lot of ways to discipline a child, and I think a lot of people, just think, hey, this is this one way of discipline, and my thing is, as kids need to grow. They need to learn. You know what I'm saying? And if we're not teaching them, we're just whipping them, we're not giving them words, we're not giving them actions, or things to do, then what is the point? So we have to be role models, and we have to, if we're going to do that to our kids, we have to do it with self-control. And a lot of people who have kids, who whoop their kids, are worldly. So you have no self-control. Your self-control, is within the world, and it's not within God, So you're over here whooping your kids, and now they got bruises. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's just important to remember. Emotional abuse. So emotional abuse was something, I think, physical abuse was 10%, emotional abuse was 90%. Being called names. Being called out of your name, cuss words, being screamed at, things like that. Those are emotional abuses, and that's something that person should not go through, especially a child. You know what I'm saying? Being cussed out, things like that. Like, that was something that was every day. It wasn't like, hey, here's a day and here's not, but that's something every day. So when you did something wrong, you got cussed out. There was cuss words everywhere. There were negative things. Like, there was just a lot of things that, a child should not hear. And I think this is in one way in which I turned from that. Because one thing that I have never done is I've never cussed a person out. I've never said anything like that because I know how that affected me. So I wanted to make sure I didn't do that to someone else. But being emotionally abused can cause a lot of mental problems, that can lead to mental problems, either right there in that moment or later on down the line, because a lot of things, like for me, I blocked them out, and I got used to them. But then once I realized what emotional abuse was, and what, I'm like, hey, that's not normal. It's not normal to get cussed out by your mom or dad. This is not something that should be happening. So I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't think that's what's supposed to happen. So, I have this verse here, and for some reason this language is in Spanish. This is funny. But I just remember multiple times being called my name, called B words, called this, called that, things that, I believe that a child should not hear or ever be called, or any person should be called. So yeah, I have Romans 12 and 2. It says, and do not be conformed to this world any longer with its superficial values and customs, but be transformed and progressively changed as you mature spiritually by renewing your mind, focusing on the godly values and ethic attitudes, so that you may prove for yourself what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect in His plan and purpose for you. So this is really, really a good example, because one, is God emotionally abusing us? No. Does He want you to emotionally abuse someone? No. That's not God's value. That's not what God wants us to do. Never once in the Bible has God said, go out and emotionally abuse somebody. Go out and physically hurt somebody, to the point. Go out and physically hurt your child. It says, do not provoke your children. You know what I'm saying? Control yourself. Self-control is the fruit of His Spirit. God never once said, hey, go out and whoop your kids and have bruises on them and go to school. Not once did God said that. It says, spare the rod, spare the child. Okay. And I don't know exactly what that verse is, but I'm definitely going to look that up and leave it down below. But, okay. But He's not saying physically abuse your child to the point where you leave bruises on them, or where you don't talk to them and say, hey, or where you're just whooping all the time and you're not giving a different form of discipline, such as, hey, we really can't do that. Hey, we shouldn't be doing that, and giving them examples of what they should do, because that's what God does. He gives us examples of what we should do. He gives us lots of grace. He gives us lots of mercy. But when it comes to parenting kids, we're not doing that. We're not giving them grace. We're not giving them mercy. We're not allowing them to just be free, and correcting them, things like that. So just be transformed, and by the renewing of your mind, because God has given us a new mind. And, our spiritual mind is different than the worldly mind. So we're in the worldly mind and we're, whooping our kids and things like that. But our spiritual mind is like, hey, let's talk it out, Let's make sure that this child understands, hey, this is not what we can do. So, because we're training them up in a way that they should go. We're training them up in those godly values and ethics and things like that, and how they should behave, So make sure that we're doing that. My last example here is always being talked down to and feeling less than. So never being really encouraged or built up, but always being felt less than, and this lesson can come from comparison. It can come from, being talked to in a way that wasn't encouraging and things like that. So, I just want everyone to know, what happened to you in your past is not your fault. What happened to you is not your fault. The emotional abuse, the physical abuse, the sexual abuse and neglect, any of those things, that was not your fault. And I believed it for a long time that I was the problem, and that if I would be just more like other people, that I wouldn't have experienced that hurt. If I would have just done more things, or been more like this other person, I would have done these different things, I wouldn't have experienced that hurt. That's not true, because God has made us all unique, and he has made us all different for a reason, you know? And we just have to accept that we're different, where each person is different, you know? And whatever's happened to us is not our fault, because we did not ask for that. You know what I'm saying? We don't have control over who our parents are. We don't have control over who our family members are. But we do have control over what we say and what we do, you know, and who we forgive. So if this person has hurt you and you know what happened to you is not your fault, it's not, okay? But if this person has hurt you, this person has, you know, done wrong to you or anything like that, you need to forgive them. Not for them, for their sake, but for your sake, because you can't take that unforgiveness into your next chapter of life. You know, when God's leading you, you have to forgive them. You know what I'm saying? You have to be like, hey, I forgive you for that. Even if you don't tell them in person, but like, hey, I forgive you for that. You know, whatever happened to me in the past is not going to affect my future. God has renewed my mind. He has taken hold of me, and he has given me that, and giving me the mindset of him rather than the mindset of the hurt and the pain that, you know, I had went through. So yes, he has healed you. So with abuse, it comes guilt. It comes shame. It comes with shame. It comes with, you know, unwanted thoughts. So you're guilty because, you know, you feel guilt because, man, I really wish, you know, I wish I could have done something, you know, or man, why did I say that? Now they over here, you know, or shame. You're shaming yourself for things, and now you have unwanted thoughts about yourself. So you just have to make sure that, you know, this come with abuse comes these things, but you're not allowing them to control your life. You're taking hold of your mind. You're taking back all of those things that was once thought in your head, and you're taking back, saying, no, that's not controlling me anymore. God is in the head. God is the head of my life, and he's the one who's giving me these words. You know what I'm saying? My abuser cannot win. You know, I'm taking hold of that, and there's no longer going to be no more guilt or shame or unwanted thoughts, because God has me. So God allows us to go through things in order to shine a light on what's happening in the world. So what I went through back in the 2000s, it's 10 times worse now. You know, you see videos all the time, and you hear things where this mom beat their child to death or something like that, you know, or you just hear so many stories. And what I was going through back then, he's shining a light. He's allowing my testimony to shine a light on what's really happening in the world. And it's not, you know, it may not be the same case, and each case is different, but this world is getting wickeder and wickeder. You know, so I don't know if wickeder is the word, but it's getting wicked, more and more wicked, you know. So I challenge you, this is my challenge, and we're going to wrap this video. But I challenge you to write I am statements and declare them over your lives. I have a video that I found that I will link, or I will show you at the end of this video. So if you stayed here, you got a little treat from me back in when I was first starting my walk, and this is a video that really encouraged me, that I made. But it's just saying, like, you know, I am statements and things like that. But it says, 1, I am beautiful. I am worthy of love. I am not my past, and I'm a child of God. So these are I am statements. You're declaring them over your life. You're declaring them, and you're saying, I am beautiful. I am worthy of love. I am worthy of God's love. Nothing in my past can hold me back. I am not my past. And I am a child of God. God has called me to be his son or his daughter, you know. So I encourage you to write these I am statements and declare them over your lives. And I pray that this video was a blessing, and I pray that you got a lot out of it. And just knowing that your childhood trauma, you know, cannot affect you. You know, or not cannot affect you, but it can affect you, but God is going to heal you through those, and it's going to be it may be a process. It may take you one day, you know, but healing takes, it's not easy, and it may take some time. So I pray that you like this, and at the end, in a few seconds, you'll see my little video. So yeah, have a good day, guys. Bye-bye. You're beautiful. You are kind. You are sweet. You are amazing. And keep doing what you're doing, because guess what? If you're patient and kind and allow the Holy Spirit to work the Spirit, or the fruits of the Spirit in you, and allow God to do a work in your life, you know, you'll be able to find your purpose, and you'll be able to help thousands of people.